Imagine this. You're standing in a silent room. No windows, no clocks. The air is thick, not with smoke or heat, but with a strange, almost invisible pressure. You can't remember how long you've been here. Days, years. Time has unraveled itself into loops. And in your chest, just beneath the surface of your breath, there's a dull ache. Not sharp, not screaming, just a quiet, persistent weight, like gravity made emotional. You've tried ignoring it, you've tried numbing it, but it doesn't go away. It hums beneath every conversation, every smile, every mundane task. You carry it like a second shadow, closer than your skin. Others don't see it, not clearly, but maybe they sense it. The slight hesitation in your voice, the glance you avoid, the tiredness in your laugh. Now imagine someone tells you, this pain is not a problem to solve. It's not a flaw to fix. It's a message. Would you believe them? Would you want to? Because everything around you, your culture, your education, your friends, has whispered the same thing since you were young. Pain is the enemy. Hide it, heal it, or better yet, pretend it's not there. Emotions like sadness, grief, rage, emptiness, they're treated like infections, signs of weakness, personal failures, and we are taught above all to be strong, to be unshaken, to be fine. But what if that's the lie? What if your deepest emotional pain isn't a sign of something broken, but a signal of something profound? What if it's not there to destroy you, but to awaken you? Look closely. The moments that shattered you, the heartbreak, the betrayal, the quiet disillusionment when life didn't unfold the way you were promised. Did they not also make you see things more clearly, more truthfully? Did they not strip away the illusions, the masks? Did they not, in some terrible and beautiful way, show you who you really are? Here lies the great paradox. The things that hurt us most might be the only things that can set us free. And yet, we run, we medicate, we distract, we chase pleasure, numbness, validation. Anything to avoid sitting with that ancient, aching question. Why does it hurt so much to be alive? But maybe that's the wrong question. Maybe the real mystery is this. Why have we forgotten the power of pain? Consider this. Civilizations have been built on triumphs, yes, but also on the ashes of suffering. Art, philosophy, poetry, religion, what are they if not the children of agony? Would Dostoevsky have written The Brothers Karamazov if he hadn't tasted despair in the Siberian cold? Would Van Gogh's colors have burned so brightly if not painted through the prism of torment? Would the blues exist without the wounds they rose from? Even the great spiritual traditions don't deny pain, they transmute it. Christ did not conquer with swords, but with suffering. Buddha did not awaken in comfort, but through the confrontation of life's inherent dukkha, its unsatisfactoriness. Rumi wrote, "The wound is the place where the light enters you. So why do you run from your wounds? What if the ache in your chest is not a malfunction, but a map? What if every sleepless night, every moment of quiet despair is trying to show you something sacred? You weren't taught to look, you weren't taught to listen. You were taught to silence the screaming, to smile through the sorrow, to hold yourself together no matter how much of you is falling apart on the inside. But cracks are not always signs of failure. Sometimes they are the beginning of light. You must ask yourself, what if I stopped trying to escape the pain and started learning from it? Because pain doesn't just hurt, it transforms. It's the pressure that forms diamonds, the fire that tempers steel, the darkness that teaches the eyes to see what light hides. And perhaps, just perhaps, the most painful moments of your life are not your enemy, but your invitation. An invitation to break the surface of your identity, to go deeper, to find the parts of yourself that only awaken when everything else falls away. But be warned, this path is not easy. It requires a kind of brutal honesty, a willingness to walk through fire without guarantees, to look in the mirror and not turn away, to feel everything you've buried and still keep walking. The question remains, if pain holds the power to transform us, why do we fear it more than death? Why do we spend our lives running from the very thing that might hold the key to our liberation? This is not just a psychological puzzle, it's a spiritual reckoning. And to understand it, we must go back into the roots of the human mind, into the ancient mechanisms that shaped us, into the philosophies that warned us, the myths that foretold us, and the modern world that distracts us. The real danger is not the pain itself, but what happens when we forget its meaning. Let us remember. Let us descend. The next step takes us into the underworld of the human psyche, where emotional pain begins its quiet war against identity. What if the thing you're calling pain is actually truth knocking at the door? To understand the hidden power of emotional pain, you must first understand why you've been trained to distrust it, why your very biology, culture, and education have made you allergic to discomfort. Not just physically, but existentially. There is a war happening inside you, a war between your survival instincts and your higher self. And it didn't start yesterday. It began when humanity first learned to dream, when early humans painted their stories on cave walls in blood and ash. They weren't just recording history, they were making sense of suffering. They were confronting death, isolation, hunger, grief. Emotional pain wasn't just personal back then, it was mythic. It was woven into the fabric of existence. But over millennia, as society evolved, something strange happened. Suffering became shameful, and pain, once a sacred teacher, became a private burden. Carl Jung wrote, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." That's the problem. We've built entire civilizations, governments, religions, corporations, self-help movements, designed not to help us confront pain, but to sanitize it, bury it, or spiritualize it until it disappears. But it doesn't disappear, it festers, it waits. You see, the modern world demands a kind of performance. From the moment you're old enough to speak, you're taught what expressions are acceptable, what dreams are realistic, and what emotions are too much. Cry too hard and you're dramatic. Feel too deeply and you're unstable. Stay sad for too long and you're broken. So you learn to fragment, to split yourself into palatable pieces, to smile while you're dying inside, to chase productivity while your soul screams for rest. This fragmentation is trauma, not just from your childhood, but from an entire cultural narrative that tells you your worth lies in how well you function, not how deeply you feel. Philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer believed that life itself is a constant struggle between desire and suffering, that to live is to suffer, and to desire is to invite more suffering. But rather than running from this truth, Schopenhauer saw it as fundamental. He dared to suggest that perhaps to be conscious is to be in pain. And yet, the world you live in tells a different story. It says you must be happy, always happy, as if joy were a permanent state rather than a fleeting visitor. Your social media feed is a curated gallery of smiles, success, and synthetic perfection. You are told that if you're not happy, you're doing something wrong. try this, change that, think positive. But here's the psychological trap. When pain arises, and it always does, you don't just feel the pain. You feel shame for feeling it. And shame is the lock that keeps the door to transformation sealed shut. Nietzsche once said, "To live is to suffer. To survive is to find some meaning in the suffering." But in a world that fears meaninglessness more than death, most people never pause long enough to ask, "What is my pain trying to tell me?" Because if they did, the whole illusion might crack. Let's go deeper. The human brain evolved primarily to keep you alive, not to make you wise. The amygdala, the fear center, scans for threat constantly, and emotional pain, especially the kind that comes from abandonment, rejection, or failure, registers as danger. It lights up the same neural circuits as physical pain. This isn't metaphor, it's biology. So your body responds with fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. You distract, dissociate, defend. You get busy, you get high, you scroll, you ghost. You tell yourself you're just not thinking about it right now, but underneath, the wound remains. Like a page you've dog-eared but refuse to read. Meanwhile, your identity, your ego, builds walls to protect you from that pain. It creates narratives. I'm not hurt, I'm just over it. I didn't need them anyway, I'm fine. But those aren't truths, they're strategies. And over time, those strategies harden into who you think you are. This is the hidden problem. Your emotional pain is not your enemy. But the part of you that fears it will do anything to make it disappear, even if it means making you disappear in the process. That's how we lose ourselves. Not all at once, but piece by piece. You stop expressing certain emotions. You stop dreaming certain dreams. You stop trusting your intuition, your sensitivity, your rage, your tenderness. And soon, you're not living a life. You're surviving a performance. Jean-Paul Sartre believed that human beings are condemned to be free. That freedom is not a gift, but a curse, because with it comes the burden of responsibility. You must choose what to do with your pain. You must decide whether to bury it or to become something through it. And here's the philosophical paradox. The very thing you're avoiding, emotional pain, is the gateway to freedom, but only if you stop seeing it as a threat and start seeing it as a guide. So ask yourself, why do you feel the need to smile when you want to scream? Why do you apologize for crying? Why do you pretend not to care when something has broken you? These aren't small questions. These are existential alarms, and they point to a collective sickness. A world that fears depth, worships control, and mistakes numbing for healing. Even Viktor Frankl, a man who survived the unspeakable horrors of Auschwitz, wrote that suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds meaning. But meaning doesn't come from the outside. No affirmation, no app, no lover, no therapist can hand it to you. You must descend into your own suffering and drag the meaning out with your bare hands. There is something ancient inside you that knows this, a deeper self that watches as you pretend, as you avoid, as you build your careful, curated identity. That deeper self is not impressed. It is waiting for you to stop running and start listening. Because emotional pain is not the end of your story. It's the invitation to rewrite it. But before you can do that, you must understand how this hidden force has already shaped you, how it's infiltrated your decisions, your relationships, your very sense of who you are. That's where we go next, because pain doesn't just visit, it molds. You don't notice it at first. It doesn't arrive like a storm. It creeps in like fog, Emotional pain, unacknowledged and unresolved, does not simply vanish. It adapts, it metastasizes, and eventually it becomes architecture. Architecture of habit, of personality, of identity itself. You think you're making choices, but in truth, your wounds are making them for you. You date someone who doesn't see you because a part of you believes love means invisibility. You stay in a job that drains you because somewhere long ago you learned that your worth is tied to how much you can endure. You keep friendships that exhaust you because rejection feels more dangerous than self-betrayal. And beneath all this, the silent hand of unprocessed pain writes your script. It's subtle, but devastating. The decisions you make are filtered through lenses crafted not from clarity, but from old scars. Cognitive psychology has a name for this: schema, mental frameworks forged in moments of intensity that later define how you interpret the world. A child who grows up feeling emotionally neglected doesn't just forget. They build a worldview around the assumption, my needs are too much, my feelings are dangerous, I must earn love by being useful, quiet, pleasing. These beliefs don't stay in childhood. They put on suits, enter relationships, become leaders, partners, parents. They become you. And you don't even know it. This is what emotional pain does when you refuse to face it. It doesn't disappear. It designs your life from the shadows. Neurologically, it's even more insidious. The brain, in its desperate attempt to avoid pain, develops neural shortcuts, triggers and defensive responses that become hardwired. You flinch before someone even raises their voice. You withdraw before intimacy can reach you. You sabotage potential joy because somewhere inside, joy feels like a prelude to loss. Your pain has hijacked your nervous system, but it goes deeper still. It becomes cultural. We live in a society that glorifies detachment, not stoicism in its noble sense, but emotional suppression masquerading as strength. Productivity over presence, independence over interdependence. We've created entire economies based on emotional avoidance, entertainment, social media, consumerism, industries that thrive on keeping you numb, distracted, aesthetically pleased but spiritually starving, and the language of this avoidance is subtle. Don't be so sensitive. Just get over it. Everything happens for a reason. It's not that deep. Every phrase a tiny erasure, a denial of depth, a quiet reinforcement that emotional pain has no place here, that to feel deeply is to be defective. So we perform. We post the highlight reel. We chase the next dopamine hit. We brand our personalities. We learn to present polished versions of ourselves that are likable, funny, digestible. And beneath it all, the ache persists. An ache we dress up in ambition. But the tragedy is not just personal, it's collective. Entire societies are being shaped by generations who never learned how to feel. Leaders make decisions devoid of empathy. Policies are crafted from spreadsheets instead of souls. Children inherit the emotional illiteracy of their parents, and the world turns cold, not because of hatred, but because of the pain no one dared to hold. This is the unseen consequence of unfelt pain, a global culture of disconnection. We think we are advanced, but what is civilization without emotional maturity? What is intelligence without compassion? What is freedom if everyone is wearing armor? Even on a spiritual level, the avoidance persists. We turn to quick-fix enlightenment, pop spirituality that promises peace without process, meditation without excavation, mantras without mourning. But as Jung warned, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. The shadow must be confronted, not bypassed with light, but integrated with courage. And yet, very few are willing, because the cost of facing pain is immense. It asks you to question the story of your entire life, to revisit every moment where you abandoned yourself to stay safe, to grieve not only what happened, but what didn't, the love you didn't receive, the words you needed and never heard, the permission to break, to rage, to weep, and still be worthy. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. You begin to notice how many of your beliefs are actually scars in disguise. The belief that you must be productive to matter. The belief that love is earned, not given. The belief that vulnerability is weakness. The belief that strength means silence. None of these are truths. They are trauma scripts. And you're not the only actor. They echo in institutions, in relationships, in art, in silence. Emotional pain, when left untouched, becomes the invisible hand of history. It repeats itself through generations. It buries wisdom in shame. It turns survival mechanisms into social norms. Until someone stops. Until someone chooses to feel, to trace the ache back to its origin, to ask not just, why am I like this, but what am I carrying that was never mine to hold? This is not healing. This is rebellion, and it is terrifying, because once you feel, you become awake. And once awake, you can no longer collude with your old life. You begin to speak differently. You demand honesty. You set boundaries. You cry without apology. You tell the truth even when your voice shakes. And the world resists you, because nothing is more threatening to a culture of emotional suppression than someone who refuses to play along. But you must, if not for yourself, then for those who come after. Because the hidden power of pain is not just that it breaks you, but that, if held correctly, it breaks you open, which leads us to the threshold, the moment where the cycle ends, where the scripts burn, where the masks fall. The rebellion begins, and it begins with a single radical act. You stop running. You stop running. Not because the pain is gone, but because something in you, some deeper, unkillable part, realizes the running itself is what's killing you. It doesn't look heroic. It doesn't feel like liberation. It feels like collapse, like falling to your knees in the middle of your life and saying, I can't do this anymore. That moment, raw, unfiltered, terrifying, is where the rebellion begins. Not with answers, but with silence. Not with clarity, but with ruin. Because before you can be remade, you must be unmade. The old version of you, the one who smiled through devastation, who swallowed tears with caffeine, who wore success like a shield, must die. And death is not poetic, it is violent, but this is sacred violence. The kind that clears the land before the harvest. The kind that says, this mask is too heavy, and I was never meant to carry it, so you take it off. And what you find beneath it is not polished. It's messy, ugly, holy, grief that's been waiting decades to scream, anger that wasn't allowed a voice, longings you've denied so long you forgot they had names. This is your soul, unclothed. And it is the most terrifyingly honest thing you have ever seen. Here is the truth. Healing is not becoming someone new. It's unbecoming who you were taught to be. It's remembering who you were before the world convinced you to forget. And to remember, you must rebel. But not in the way you've been taught to think of rebellion. This isn't about rage against the machine. It's not political. It's existential. This is a rebellion of the heart, of the spirit, of the nervous system. It begins by choosing, deliberately, defiantly, to feel. to sit in the discomfort, to listen to your pain as if it were a prophet, not a parasite, to ask, what are you here to teach me? What have I not yet learned that you keep returning to show me? It is choosing to tell the truth to yourself first. I'm not okay. I feel abandoned. I'm exhausted from pretending. I don't even know who I am anymore. These are not weaknesses. They are doorways. They are the beginning of sovereignty. Because the moment you tell the truth, you stop participating in your own deception. You step out of the illusion. You reclaim your life from the machinery of suppression. And this reclamation requires fire. The fire of discernment, of choosing what stays and what must burn. You might lose people, identities, entire futures you built on the foundation of falsehood, but what you gain is yourself, not the self that conforms, the self that remembers. This is what all great mystics, philosophers, and warriors of the soul discovered. That pain is not the opposite of awakening, it's the portal to it. Nietzsche called it becoming what you are. Jung called it individuation. The Greeks called it katabasis, the descent into darkness that precedes transformation. And all of them agree, you cannot rise until you fall. Let's be clear. This rebellion is not romantic. It is not an Instagram-worthy transformation montage. It is days of emptiness, nights of shaking, moments when you think you're going insane. Because when you remove the coping mechanisms, what's left is raw humanity. And raw humanity is overwhelming. But slowly, something starts to shift. You begin to see beauty in unexpected places, in the tremble of your own breath, in the way tears come without shame, in the silence between thoughts, in the new boundaries you draw, not from anger, but from self-respect. You begin to reclaim your attention. Where you once obsessed over being liked, now you wonder, do I even like myself? Where you once chased validation, now you crave intimacy, the real kind. Messy, honest, vulnerable. You stop seeing your pain as a punishment and begin to recognize it as your compass. Because it never hated you. It wasn't trying to destroy you. It was trying to wake you to the life you were meant to live. Not the one handed to you by a wounded world, but the one that's been pulsing beneath your skin since you first inhaled breath. And here's where it becomes revolutionary, because when you reclaim your own humanity, you become a mirror for others. You hold space differently. You listen without needing to fix. You cry with people instead of for them. You stop offering advice and start offering presence. And in a world that runs on performance, presence is a rebellion. You begin to love differently, not from need, not from fear, but from a kind of grounded, wild knowing that says, I see your pain. I know it because I've walked through my own, and I will not ask you to be anything but exactly what you are. That kind of love is radioactive. It breaks cycles. It heals lineages. It terrifies the systems built on your silence. Because if enough people feel, the world changes. Not through politics, not through war, but through the simple, devastating truth of being human together. So now the question is no longer, how do I get rid of my pain? It becomes, how do I partner with it? How do I become the kind of person who can hold it, honor it, learn from it, without being consumed? And the answer is simple, though not easy. You show up every day without expectation, without needing to be healed, just with willingness to feel, to fall apart, to rise again, because this is what it means to be alive, not numb, not perfect, but awake. And as you awaken, you realize pain was never the villain. It was the doorway, the sacred threshold, the thing that broke your illusion so that you could finally come home to yourself. But there's still one truth left, the deepest one, the one that will shatter everything you thought you knew, not just about pain, but about reality itself. You thought pain was something to escape. Then you learned it was something to face. But now you see it was never pain that you were truly afraid of. It was yourself, because hidden inside every ounce of agony is not just a message, but a memory. A memory of who you were before the world broke you into fragments. A memory of your wholeness, your fire, your divine capacity to feel everything, to hold everything, to become everything. This is the ultimate truth. Emotional pain is not a punishment. It is a passage, a rite of initiation into the full, terrifying, holy complexity of being alive. You were never meant to bypass it. You were meant to be transfigured by it. Think about it. Every spiritual tradition, every myth worth its salt, contains suffering at its center. Christ crucified, Buddha starving beneath the Bodhi tree, Prometheus chained to the rock, liver eaten by an eagle, every day for giving fire to humans. These are not stories of agony for agony's sake. They are blueprints. They are maps. Because pain doesn't destroy you. It dissolves who you're not. It is the fire that burns away the false, and what survives the flame is real. This is not just spiritual poetry, it is psychological truth. Carl Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." He understood what so many refuse to accept, that enlightenment is not light without shadow, it is light through shadow. The final realization, the one that hums beneath all others, is this: the pain you resist the most is where your power lives. Why? Because the wound is the womb. The broken place is the birthplace. The scar is not a reminder of what hurt you. It is proof of what you survived. And survival is not the end of the story. Transcendence is. But real transcendence is not floating above your life in detached bliss. It is descending so deeply into the rawness of your experience that you find God in the wound, not as an idea, not as a distant father figure, but as a presence that emerges only in your willingness to be fully here, fully surrendered, fully cracked open. There is a moment, if you go far enough into your pain, when the line between agony and awe disappears. You're on your knees, sobbing, certain you're dying, and then suddenly, absurdly, there is stillness, a strange, quiet beauty, not because the pain has stopped, but because something in you has shifted. You're no longer resisting it. You're witnessing it, holding it, becoming vast enough to contain it. And in that moment, you are free. Not because the world has changed, because you have. You've become unshakable, not through invincibility, but through intimacy with the parts of yourself that once terrified you. You now know grief is not weakness. It is love that has lost its anchor. Rage is not toxicity. It is clarity burning through injustice. Despair is not emptiness. It is the scream of a soul that refuses to settle for a numb existence. You no longer shame your emotions. You bow to them. And this reverence, this radical intimacy with your own inner world, is what turns suffering into gold. This is the alchemy. Not turning pain into pleasure, but pain into presence. You realize the very thing you thought made you broken is what makes you divine. Your capacity to hurt is not your flaw. It's your gateway to compassion, to connection, to creation. Every poem you love, every song that haunts you, Every painting that stopped your breath was born in the crucible of someone else's suffering, and now you carry your own crucible, not with dread but with honor. You become a different kind of human, one who doesn't flinch at someone else's sorrow, one who can sit with another in the dark and say, "Me too, I've been there and I'm still here." That's power, not dominance, not detachment, but presence so profound it transforms the air around you. You stop trying to fix others. You see the God in them even when they're bleeding, especially when they're bleeding, because you've seen the God in yourself. And now you understand what was never taught. Pain doesn't come to break you. It comes to introduce you to the self that is not afraid, not hiding, not performing, the self that is eternal, the self that remembers, the one you were born as, before the world forgot your name and gave you another. So now, in this moment, you have a choice, not the shallow choice of stay broken or get fixed, but the real choice. Will you keep running from the pain that shaped you, or will you walk back into the fire and reclaim what it tried to give you all along? You know what it is now. The ache was never your enemy. It was your invitation to stop pretending, to stop performing, to return, not to who you were, but to who you are, beneath the rubble, behind the mask, beneath the ache. There is no final destination, only this, the willingness to feel. And in that willingness, everything changes, because when you stop numbing your pain, you awaken your vision, and with awakened eyes you see what the blind cannot. That suffering is not the opposite of joy, it is the doorway into it, and your scars, they are not shame, they are maps. Maps to the truth you were always meant to remember. You were never broken, you were becoming.